Hello, Lovelace, and welcome to our history lesson for today. Now, you can see on the screen, we've got a Saxon village, and today is all about thinking about where the Anglo-Saxons might have set up their new settlements, where they might have built their new villages, having invaded and moved across to Britain. So, quick recap. After the Romans had left Britain, the Anglo-Saxons invaded. Can you remember some of the reasons they chose to come to Britain? Have a quick think. Well, first of all, there were bad floods at home. Remember, the Anglo-Saxon tribes, many of them were farmers. And so if the lands were getting flooded regularly, they weren't able to farm those areas of land. They weren't able to produce food for their families or to trade with. So these bad floods became pushing factors that pushed them away from their homes in Northern Europe. No Roman army left to defend Britain. Britain was now without a defence force, without an army. It was just a few ragtag tribes of Britons trying to keep the place defended and safe. So the Anglo-Saxon tribes would find it reasonably easy to invade this land. There were too many wars at home. There were lots of warring factions, lots of warring tribes in the northern Europe areas of northern Germany and Denmark and the Netherlands, and the countries where our Anglo-Saxon tribes would have set sail from. With all these wars, it became just too difficult to live there. So again, another pushing factor driving them towards Britain. Not much space left at home. With all these floods and war damage, the space that was there was becoming more and more tight for the people. So they were driven away. No space for them to have their farms, their homes, their villages. But Britain promised good farmland. So there's a pull factor, pulling the Saxon tribes towards Britain. And finally, one of the main reasons was the kings of Britain would pay money for the Anglo-Saxon warriors to come across and help protect their lands. They welcomed them with open arms to protect their parts of Britain. There's another pulling factor. So, one of your homeworks this week was to try and recreate this map, to draw a map of the UK and to identify where the various tribes left and where they arrived in Britain. Now, I was really, really impressed with some of the maps that I saw, but I did notice a couple of people did get their arrows a little bit confused. So just to recap, 3 tribes of Europeans left their homes and headed across the North Sea to Britain. The Jutes, the Saxons, and the Angles. Now, we can see from our key that the yellow area represents the Jutes. So the Jutes left from here in northern Denmark, and they headed south down through the North Sea to the southern coast of England and Kent down here. The Saxons are our red lines. The Saxons, they started their life, they started their journey in northern Germany and the Netherlands here. And they crossed the North Sea to East Anglia, this sticky out bit on the east side of England. And then finally the Angles, they left southern Denmark here, and their tribes split and they landed in 2 areas of England. Here in Northumbria, just south of the Scottish border, and here in Mercia, an area in the Midlands, in the middle of England. Okay, so just a recap on where they came from and where they went to, because I did notice in the homeworks a couple of people just getting their arrows a little bit muddled up. So, if you were moving to a new country, a new home, what would you want to take with you? Just have a moment and have a think. I'm sure there will be lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff. You'd want all your computer equipment. You'd want all your toys. I'm sure from the kitchen, you'd want all your pots and your pans and your cutlery and your crockery. I'm sure you'd want pictures. I'm sure you'd want clothes. The list goes on and on and on and on. And quite often, if we see people moving home, or if you've moved home, you'll need whole lorries to move all your stuff. Unfortunately, the Anglo-Saxons were traveling in small wooden boats and couldn't carry all that stuff. And a lot of that stuff they wouldn't have had anyway. There were certainly no computer games back in Anglo-Saxon times. Also, when they arrived in Britain, they'd probably need to fight to get onto land and to find some land for them to settle on. So with all that in mind, what would you bring now? Have a moment to think. What would you take if you were an Anglo-Saxon invading Britain? Well, to be totally honest, not a lot. Along with some food and water for the crossing and the first day or two, the main things they would take would be weapons and tools. They would probably take some animal skins as well, which they would use as blankets, and maybe some basic cooking pots, but not much else. The pictures here are genuine Anglo-Saxon weapons. These have been dug up by archaeologists and represent some of the tools and weapons that Anglo-Saxons would have taken. Clearly, the axe handle would have rotted away, so that the handle there is not an original one. And much of the shield is made of wood, so that would have probably rotted away as well. But the boss, this center part of the shield, gives archaeologists clear clue as to what the shield would have looked like. So tools like axes and knives would be used for lots of different things, including building, cutting wood for the fire, farming, and hunting. But they could also be used as weapons. But they would also use more traditional weapons, including the swords and the shields. So you can imagine, as farmers, the farmers would carry knives on their belts in little scarabs like this, or they would use axes regularly for chopping wood, cutting down crops, cutting trees, and so on. So those will be everyday tools. But I'm sure you can also see how useful they would be in a fight. So those tools would often be used as weapons, but the Anglo-Saxons had more traditional weapons as well, like the swords and like shields, to help defend themselves and protect themselves in a fight. Now, this image here is not Britain. It's an image that contains all the different features that we find around the world. But it's just to help us to understand the task and the challenge that lay ahead for the Anglo-Saxons. So although not all of these features are available in Britain, many of them are. A lot of these landscape features we can find in Britain. I want you to imagine for a moment being the leader of your tribe. You have to decide where you're going to build your new village, your settlement. Have a look around this plan, have a look around this picture, and decide, where would you want to build your village and why? Take a moment, have a think. Okay, so you've got a big decision now. You've got all these people in your tribe relying on you to make a good choice, finding a place for your village that will provide everything you're going to need. There's lots of things you need to consider. For example, Maybe you could build your village on an island. You're surrounded by water, so it'd be very easy to defend from attack. If some of the Britons decide to have a go, or if some of the other Anglo-Saxon tribes that move into Britain decide they want to take your village, then that one will be very easy to defend. So maybe an island would be a good choice. Maybe you could build in the valley. Now they've moved across to Britain, the weather is going to be a little bit worse than they're used to. Strong winds, storms, rain, and so on. So maybe building in a valley will protect them from some of the worst weather. That hill there, and say the raised prairies, might just protect their village from some of the worst winds and things. So maybe a valley would be a good idea. Building near a forest will provide your village with all the wood it could possibly need. Remember, the Anglo-Saxons would use wood for building their homes. They would build fences. They would use it for parts of their weapons and tools, for handles and things. They would also use it as firewood to keep the fire burning for food and heat. So keeping wood close by, very, very useful. So would you build your village near a forest? What about building near the river? That's going to give you, with your boats, very easy travel and access to other towns and villages and other places. So you can trade. Hopefully, if your farms work well, you're going to have a surplus. You're going to have extra food that you might be able to trade and swap with local other villages. So the river would give you easy transportation. What about building near a lake to provide fresh water for your village? Or the flat plains. Remember, we're farmers. So if we've got some flat land, then that will be ideal for creating fields, planting our food, feeding our animals, and all the things that farmers need to do. So would you build on the flat plains? It's a difficult choice. Where would you choose? And that feeds into our task for today. We know that the three tribes landed in Kent, East Anglia, Northumbria, and Mercia. But where should they have built their villages? When they arrived, what sort of lands should they have been looking for? What things did they need nearby to allow them to survive and thrive as villagers in Anglo-Saxon Britain? Your task for today, as the leader of your tribe, is to write a speech. Basically a set of instructions. I want you to tell your tribe to go out and look for a place to build. I want you to explain to them what they should look for in the perfect location and why. Try to list things with the most important first. So if you think the most important thing is going to be wood, then in your speech you need to explain, go out and look for a space near to some trees. So we will have wood for our fire and wood for our building. So that if you think that's the most important, then that needs to be near the beginning of your speech. Now, what I've done is I've done an example start to the speech. This is not the whole thing, but if you want to use some of these phrases or some of these lines to start your speech, you are more than welcome. So here's my example start. My friends, we stand on these strange new lands with our future in our own hands. We must seek a space where our families can thrive with food in their bellies, a place where they can be safe. I ask you to go and seek such a place with, and then it's for you to carry on. What does your space here in Britain need to have? What do you need close by to allow your village to grow and thrive, to allow your villagers to feed themselves, to protect themselves, to keep warm, to have places to live in, and so on, and so on, and so on. You have a big responsibility as the village leader. Help your village make a really, really good choice as to where they decide to build their village. Good luck. You've got a big, big task on your hands here. I look forward to reading your speeches and celebrating you making good choices as to where to build your village. Good luck, Lovelace. That's the end of the lesson, and I will see you all soon. Take care.